One man says a meat-heavy, almost zero-carb diet reversed his prediabetes, fixed his eyesight, and gave him superhero energy at nearly 70 years old. But what happens when we line those claims up against large, long-term health studies and Bible-based principles of caring for the body? Is carnivore the ultimate fix or a short-term win that might cost you in the long run? Today, I'm going to be breaking down a pro-carnivore interview where Jim shares how Atkins, a near-carnivore lifestyle, changed his life. I'm going to affirm what's true, but also test the bold claims using peer-reviewed research and scripture-shaped health principles. Let's start where Jim started, which was weight gain, fatigue, and a body falling apart. Before I get there, I want to remind you, if you like this video, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share this video so that others can experience health blessings. Okay, let's get into it now.
I kept, middle of the summer, I went in for my annual physical, and my doctor, who is a neighbor and very good friend, goes, "Wow, what have you done?" I said, "Well, I'm on the Atkins diet. I'm on a very low carbohydrate diet. I, eat meat and small amount of green vegetables, so there's hardly any carbohydrates there, and no alcohol." And he goes, "Oh, that's dangerous. You better watch out." And I'm like, "What's dangerous about it? Am I going to not get diabetes?" And of course, he was thinking all of this high fat and the phobia about fat and all of that stuff. And I don't know. The debate on that is out. All I know is I feel better. As diabetes, remember probably 25 years ago or so, late 90s, maybe around 2000, I was having periods of just exhaustion. And my wife said, "You got to go see the doctor." I'm like, "What do you see the doctor for? You're a little tired?" I mean, you see the doctor if you're sick or you got a broken bone, but you're a little tired. So they convinced me to go to the doctor. And this is 25 years ago. And the doctor gave me a glucose tolerance test and said, "Whoops, sucks to be you. You're pre-diabetic." And, what was I, 40, early 40s? I said, "What do I do, doc?" "Nothing to be done. You're just going to get worse. The diabetes is going to get worse and worse and worse. And eventually we'll put you on medicine. And then that medicine won't work. And we'll have to give you another medicine. And eventually that won't work, and then we'll have to give you another medicine, and that won't work. And then, and then after that, it's like toes and feet. And
it's terrible that they just give you, like, they're basically handing out death sentences to people. Like, they're saying, "There's no hope. Just,
hope.
You just drew the short straw."
Yeah, that's the situation, isn't it? So let's look at Jim's story. He retires, he gains weight, he becomes obese, he becomes fatigued, pre-diabetic. He goes on a strict Atkins diet, very low carb, lots of meat, minimal vegetables, no alcohol. And I agree with no alcohol. It's a good choice. And he drops from 200 pounds to 160 pounds, and he feels dramatically better. What does the evidence actually say? What does it actually show about low carb for diabetes and weight? There are randomized trials and meta-analyses. So there's low carb and ketogenic diets. They can improve HbA1c, weight, and blood pressure in type 2 diabetes, sometimes achieving short-term remission at 6 to 12 months in. Remission rates drop over time, though. One systematic review found remission falling from 62% at 1 year to 13% by year 5, with few high-quality long-term randomized controlled trials. There are other patterns. We can look at Mediterranean, plant-forward diets, high-fiber diets. Also, these things reverse metabolic risk and lower HbA1c without extreme meat intake. We also, I believe, we should have a Bible-shaped health lens when we look at things. When you look at the creation diet, when Adam and Eve were created, what did they eat? They ate plant-based. And the meat was added when you had the fall of humankind. And you had this fall, and there was also this worldwide flood, which destroyed a lot of the plants. So what did they have to eat? They had to eat the clean meats. So there's this creation diet of fruits, grains, nuts, seeds, and vegetables, which the Bible emphasizes a whole plant foods diet with animal foods as optional. And in Scripture story, later additions of meat were added, just like I shared with you. So this was never the original diet, this meat-eating diet. So we have to be good stewards of our body. Being good stewards of our body means that we should not just ask, does this help me lose weight in 6 months? What we really should be asking is, does this honor the body long term? A pattern that cuts refined carbs is good. A pattern that cuts all plant foods and leans heavily on meat clashes with the broader biblical theme of simple garden-based living. We need to correct the death sentence narrative. What do I mean? Well, in that clip, we hear that Jim's doctor 25 years ago said that there's nothing to be done. You'll just get worse and you'll need more meds. Well, the interview calls this a death sentence and implies medicine has no hope. Modern research shows that this is not true. Intensive lifestyle interventions, calorie control, activity, and whole food diets can put diabetes into remission even without a carnivore approach. So we need a balanced takeaway. Standard practice has often been pessimistic, that's true, but today we know multiple dietary patterns like low carb, low fat, Mediterranean, whole food plant-based can dramatically improve or even reverse early type 2 diabetes. Framing one specific meat-heavy diet as the only path of hope is overstated. So cutting refined carbs can help, but what about the claims that carnivore diet fixed his eyes? Interesting, right? Maybe you know someone who's dealing with eyesight problems. Let's listen to this and see what we can glean.
Our class, thrown them away. How much of that is low carb, carnivore? I can't help but think that there's some kind of relation there. And you look up on the internet and they'll tell you sugar increases the thickness of the lens in your eyes, and that gives you myopia. How much myopia is due to, your growth and the shape of your eye from the shape of your eye due as you're growing? Or I think this is I think sugar as a young person is probably at the very least a contributing factor, if not a significant factor in myopia in children. And the other is glaucoma. I was borderline glaucoma, and they were always measuring the pressure in your eye and looking at the retina and all of that. And the last few times I've been in, ever since I've been on this diet, my eye pressure has been perfect.
Wow.
Well, Jim's claim is this: lifelong glasses, told his eyesight was too poor for a Navy surface warfare program, by the way, and after an ultra low carb, near carnivore diet, his myopia was gone, didn't need glasses. So his borderline glaucoma normalized, the eye pressure was now perfect, and he attributes this largely to the sugar removal. What does the science say about diet and myopia? Well, studies in children suggest that refined carbohydrates may be associated with a higher myopia risk, especially in girls, and overall pro-inflammatory diets. These may relate to more myopia. But major drivers of myopia are some of these things that I'm going to list to you: high screen time, and also, working on screens all the time during your work; low outdoor light exposure. And this was confirmed by a large meta-analysis after COVID, which found each hour of extra daily screen time raises myopia risk significantly. In adults, refractive error rarely disappears completely. Some improvement could be from different testing conditions, cataract or lens changes, switching between distance and near vision needs. So there is also risk of our diet with glaucoma. So diet and glaucoma risk needs to be addressed. A large cohort found that there was no clear association between low carb diets and overall glaucoma risk, though low carb with more plant-based fats and protein might reduce risk in some subtypes. There's other evidence which stresses leafy green vegetables rich in nitrates may reduce glaucoma risk by up to 20%. We need to take a Bible-informed health perspective on these eye claims. Reducing sugar in processed foods fits with biblical temperance, avoiding excess and stimulants. But excluding the very foods like dark leafy greens, berries, colorful vegetables that are the most protective for eye and vascular health does conflict with the principle of using every good gift from the Creator wisely. We need to have a faith-consistent approach. Slash refined sugar and ultra-processed snacks. Increase antioxidant-rich plant foods that protect the circulation in the eye. That's what we need. We need to use low-carb or time-restricted eating, if medically appropriate, but not as an excuse to ignore fruits and vegetables. The mouth tells a similar story in this interview. Jim's gums stopped bleeding, and the question is that some sort of carnivore miracle? Let's listen to his story.
I was on keto, carnivore, somewhere's in there. If my wife's not around, the vegetables stay in the refrigerator. I have to eat a few little vegetables because if I don't, she'd just have a fit. But, oh, by the way, with her keto, she's a marathoner. She's 71 years old, Boston Marathon qualified, just, lost another 10 pounds. And she's just an incredible athlete. And she's realized this is great too. But getting back to the dentist, so the hygienist is like, "Oh wow, you're flossing and no blood in the gum, no bleeding in the gum, and very, so what are you doing?" And I said, "Well, I've always taken care of my teeth. I have an electric brush and a water pick, but I've been doing that for quite some time. But I am doing low carb. I am doing the Atkins super low carb Atkins diet." And they're like, "Oh, well, that explains it. All of our patients that are eating low carb or carnivore, they all have great gums."
All right, let's address this one. Let's address this. Jim's anecdote, he shares about this carnivore diet helping his bleeding gums essentially disappear or stop bleeding. The hygienist allegedly says that all our low carb or carnivore patients have great gums, implying some sort of robust pattern. What the research actually shows is this. It's that free sugars and sugar-sweetened beverages are consistently associated with higher risk of gingivitis and periodontal disease. Several trials show that diets low in refined carbs and high in omega-3s, vitamin C and D, fiber, and antioxidants reduce gum bleeding and periodontal inflammation. A Mediterranean-style, plant-rich pattern is associated with less gum inflammation, while higher red meat intake correlates with worse gum health, actually. Jim's benefits likely came from major sugar reduction, calorie control, and weight loss, possibly fewer ultra-processed foods. But the evidence points toward a low-sugar, high-fiber, micronutrient-rich diet, not necessarily a high-meat, low-plant diet as the best pattern for the gums. This is the case here. So we need to have this faith-based application. Wisdom says to avoid the sweet dainties and overindulgence. Wisdom says to prioritize simple, whole, plant-based foods. That means we should limit sugar and refined flour. We should not throw out fruit, vegetables, and whole grains to deliver vitamin C, folate, and fiber, which is all critical for gum and immune health. So far, cutting sugar looks good. But what about loading the plate with meat day after day? What does that cause? Well, let's take a look and see what happens here. Let's listen to his story.
Yeah, he's not been harassing you about your cholesterol or anything?
Well, I found with this diet, my cholesterol didn't change at all. There was no change. If anything, it's gotten a little better. Yeah, no, it's interesting. And looking at listening to other people on YouTube and stuff talk about it, I don't think it's uncommon not to have your cholesterol go. I think it's like 50% or at least a third of the people don't, have their cholesterol go down. A third, their cholesterol stays the same, and about a third it goes up. And they don't know what to do about that. But with the weight loss in this diet, my what they call the HSCRP, which is the measure of inflammation, that's gone right down into the toilet.
Right, let's address this. So cholesterol didn't change at all, maybe got a bit better, he says. So here they're suggesting, if we look at the research anyways, okay? They suggest that a third of people see LDL go down and a third go unchanged and a third go up. But here he says about how they don't know what to do about that. But they emphasize low inflammation markers, okay? We need to get a scientific picture on high meat intake. There's large cohort and meta-analytic data that processed and unprocessed red meat are linked to high risk of cardiovascular disease and type 2 diabetes. Reducing unprocessed red meat by 3 servings a week can give a small but real reduction in cardiovascular disease risk and diabetes risk. There's also newer data which links processed red meat with increased dementia risk. When we replace this with nuts and legumes, we actually lower the risk of dementia. There are also some Mendelian and randomization work which has found that there's weak or no causal cardiovascular disease link from red meat itself. But dietary patterns high in red processed meat still are associated with worse outcomes in real life. When we look at the issue is that a pro-inflammatory diet is a meat diet. When you think about meat, when you ingest meat, well, it comes and it sits in your gut and it takes longer to digest, thus creating this sort of backlog in the body and leading to inflammation. We really need to have a Bible-shaped health principle focus. A biblical goal isn't just to feel good now, but to be faithful stewards across decades. A diet that may offer short-term metabolic gains, but potentially raise long-term health risks of heart disease, stroke, and dementia conflicts with that calling if safer, equally effective patterns exist. So we need to keep the good. Let's cut refined sugar and cut white flour. Let's avoid ultra-processed and deep-fried foods. And let's add what's missing. Let's build our plate around vegetables, fruits, legumes, whole grains, nuts, seeds with small but wise portions of clean animal products if used at all. Again, I advocate for a whole foods, plant-based diet. But if that's not possible for you, then you can add a small portion of those clean animal products. We have to be careful about how we eat, how long or how often we fast as well. We can have long fasting windows, which can help us with our health. But if we do fasting too much, it could also, hurt us, of course, because we need calories, we need nutrients. So let's be careful how we eat and what we eat, okay? And this is my emphasis for today. And if you found this interesting and you found this beneficial, don't forget to give a thumbs up, subscribe to this channel, and share this video so that others too can benefit. Thank you for joining me. Bye-bye.